Dr. Hassan Shafi, the President of the University, Dr. Sajida Alvi, the guest speaker of this morning, Dr. Salim Akhtar, whom I have requested to chair this meeting, friends, colleagues. It's a very happy day for us, and we are privileged to welcome this morning a scholar of great standing. I do so both as the Director General of Islamic Research Institute and as someone who has known Dr. Sajida Alvi. It's the McGillian connection. McGill is my alma mater, and while I did not have the privilege to study under her, I met her in 1976 when I went to spend a year on sabbatical leave, and since then we have remained constantly in touch. I have followed rather inconsistently her academic writings, have been aware of what she has been doing, and it was a pleasure to see someone who went from Punjab University, not quite, but started her career at McGill and rose to great prominence within a matter of a few years. She has, to her credit, a number of publications. She has a 2-volume work, Mirat al-Alam, which is History of Aurangzeb. It was published by the University of Punjab Press, Lahore, 1979. Another book by her is Advice on the Art of Government, an Indo-Islamic Mirror for Princes, Mu'izza al-Jahangiri of Muhammad Baqir Najm Sani, which was published by State University Press of New York. And the recent publication is, she of course had to write a number of books for children to learn Urdu. I have just had a glimpse of it, but those who have read it have expressed great satisfaction with the book, that it would be a good book for the teaching of teaching of Urdu to Pakistani children who are growing up in Canada. With these few words, I do not want to go into in great detail about what she has been doing. I think this would be enough. Of course, she has written a number of papers in academic journals, has also contributed to articles to encyclopedias. The only thing remiss I see in her curriculum vitae that she has no article in Islamic studies. I'm sure she'll overcome this shortcoming soon. The subject that she chose on her own came to me as a pleasant surprise. Speaking at a personal level, I have been very, very much interested in knowing what was happening in the 18th century in different parts of the Muslim world, especially, of course, in this part of the world to which we belong, South Asia. And as all of you are aware, those associated with the Institute, that we had a long ongoing seminar on the subject, and we are about to publish those papers in the form of a book. So it was a pleasant surprise when she volunteered to give a talk on the Islamic revival that was taking place in the 17th and 18th centuries in South Asia, but focusing on one particular group, the NAQSHBANDIs. With these words, let me request Dr. Sajida Alvi to make her presentation. Sajida.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much, Dr. Ansari, for giving such kind worded introduction. And it's my honor and pleasure to be with you today to share my results of my research on the NAQSHBANDIA SILSALA. See, I'm trained as an historian, and so I'm not a theologian, I'm not a specialist of hadith, sharia, kalam, or fiqh. So my approach to the Sufism is as an historian and historian of ideas, how they were affecting and how they were influenced by the social and political context of their respective periods. So the title of my paper is Islamic Renewal and Reform in the 17th and 18th century, Northern India, Discourses of Naqshbandi Mujaddidis in their socio-political context. The founder of the Mujaddidi branch of the Naqshbandi order, Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi, who died in 1624, received the title of the Renewer of the second millennium, Mujaddid al-Fisani, from his prominent contemporary alim, Abdul Hakim Sialkoti, who died in 1657. Many intellectuals from 18th century to the present maintained their support for Sialkoti's designation for Sirhindi. They paid tribute to Sirhindi and his descendants for upholding the primacy of Sharia and Sunnah in Islam against the onslaught of syncretic religious and social trends prevalent during the reign of Emperor Akbar, who ruled from 1556 to 1605, and his successors. 3 generations later, the war of succession between the sons of Emperor Jahangir, who reigned from 1627 to 1658, the Naqshbandi Sufis supported Prince Aurangzeb. Their rationale of the support was the same as was given by the Emperor Aurangzeb's official and non-official historians, that Aurangzeb was the upholder of Sharia, and his elder brother Dara Shikoh, killed in 1659, the main contender to the throne was, I quote, the enemy of Sharia and its followers, particularly the Naqshbandis. And these are the words of Khwaja Muhammad Masoom, son of Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi, not mine. This kind of connotation has been transmitted generation after generation about the Naqshbandiya's role in the uplift of Sharia and protection of Sunnah. And then we see that the biographers and the Khalifas of his the sons, grandsons, biographers, and the Khalifas, they all were repeating that. They were all saying that Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi and his movement of Tajdeed made a difference in the subcontinent. And so much so that the foremost alim of the 19th century, Shah Abdul Aziz, who was connected with the Naqshbandiyas as well as the others, also echoed similar views. Even in non-Naqshbandiya and non-hagiographical literature, Sirhindi is perceived by many thinkers as the protector and conservator of Islam in India in the face of a growing tide of syncretism. Among them, for example, is the philosopher-poet of this century, Muhammad Iqbal, who died in 1938, as you all know, who claimed Sirhindi to be, I quote, the knower of the secrets and the guardian of the treasure house of Muslim community. And that is in his poem, in Bale Jibril, Punjab ke Peerzadon ke Naam. He praised him for his supposed ideological confrontation with the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. As we know, modern scholars not only emphasized but even exaggerated the Naqshbandi role in political and religious developments in Mughal India, and their presumed impact on Muslim community during Mughal and British periods. And that is open to question, which I will touch upon later on at the end of the paper. Such an attribution is obviously influenced by the 20th century political developments in India, including the establishment of Pakistan. Here, we are not concerned about the factors which solidified Sirhindi's image over the centuries, or the modern historiographical inequities or misinterpretations of the Naqshbandiya order's participation in pre-modern Indian politics and socio-religious developments. Instead, our purpose here is to take a fresh look at the discourses of the biological and spiritual descendants of Sirhindi, both the Murids and the Sheikhs, and this study is a follow-up of my earlier historical overview of the Mujaddid and Tajdeed tradition in the subcontinent, which was published in the Journal of Turkish Studies in 1994. Here we are limiting ourselves only to the Naqshbandi Mujaddidi Sufi tradition, and in our search for materials on the Naqshbandi efforts of reform and Islam, reform and renewal, that is Islah and Tajdeed, we looked for the sources which shed light on their efforts to reinvigorate Aqidah and reform in its practice by their disciples. See, this paper is a rather long one, and it has two parts. One deals with the manuals written for the instruction of disciples, that is Adab Muridan. And the second part, I have done the case study of two well-known Sufis, that is Khaja Muhammad Masoom, son of Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi, and Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan. So I thought, due to the constraints of time, I would just summarize the first part, which is 13-page long, and focus on the second part. So, and hopefully this paper will be published in a collection of essays which are being in the honor of late Professor Khaliq Ahmed Nizami. And it was presented in its initial form at Duke University earlier, and then now it will be appearing in print. So I skip all that, but I should mention that a few words on my sources, so that you know how I approached this issue. So in the first part, there are three manuals. Two were written in Delhi and one in Sindh, explain the role and position of the Shaykh as understood by the Sheikhs as well as by their disciples. These texts fall in the category of hagiographical literature, but do not glorify the teachings and personality of a particular Sufi. These guides provide a general conceptual base for our deliberation. The first of three is Irshadut Talibin of Qazi Sanaullah Panipati, who died in 1810, and he was a Qazi by profession, disciple, student, and Khalifa of Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan, and one of the most prolific writers of the period, having written 25 works on various aspects of Islam, as well as a 13-volume exegesis of Quran. The second one is by Abu Sayyid Mujaddidi, who died in 1834, and the title of that work is Hidayatul Talibin, and he was the Khalifa and custodian or Sajada Nashin of Shah Ghulam Ali. And then we have the last one, which is Janabi al-Hayat al-Abadiyya fi Tariqe Tullabul Naqshbandiya, written by Abul Hasan Dahiri Naqshbandi, who died in 1767. Abul Hasan has had a significant following in Sindh in the 18th century. He differed from Sanaullah and Abu Sayyid on two accounts. First, he came from Sindh, a geographical region which during his lifetime did not suffer the social and political turmoil of Delhi. And secondly, Abul Hasan was not associated with the Naqshbandiya tradition as it developed under his contemporary Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan. However, the spiritual genealogy of Abul Hasan's master, Shaykh Abdul Rasul, connected him to Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi through his master, Shah Fatahullah, the disciple of Sirhindi's son, Muhammad Masoom. The reason I'm giving you all these, the nisbah, is that they consider themselves to be the spiritual descendants of Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi, whereas Abu Sayyid Mujaddidi was the biological descendant of Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi. So I skip all these things in which I have touched upon the topics like, let me give you at least the titles. They talk about tariqat and shariat and the role of the wali, his powers and limitations, the sheikh in the making, and who is a proper sheikh. I mean, there are so many interesting questions raised in these Adabul Muridin or Muridan manuals, that it makes it a very interesting academic study. They are not suggesting that a sheikh should control the disciple and the disciple should really follow the sheikh blindly. Instead, there is constant questioning. Who is the sheikh? Does he have the proper credentials? What are the elements which make him a superior sheikh? And so on and so forth. So there is a detail. The adab of the sheikh. Is sheikh crucial for the spiritual ascendancy? And then we have the last one is that who is a genuine sheikh? So then hopefully you will read that when it's printed. So now I move to even summary. I think I should skip. At how much time I have? We started late.
Yes, we have to finish by 12 o'clock.
Okay, and then
proceed to
oh, so that means I must leave enough time for the discussion and to benefit from your feedback. So therefore, I have to unfortunately skip even the summary of first part. So I come to Khaja Muhammad Masoom and Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan, the exemplars and their teachings and their followers. After this my theoretical discussion, which I have not shared with you, I have discussed the qualifications of the sheikh and the role in the NAQSHBANDIA order. We look at the influence of two masters through the eyes of their contemporaries. We also delineate their spiritual and intellectual characteristics and identify the factors which contributed to their moral authority, as well as their role in the reconstruction of the Indo-Islamic society and in the development of Muslim consciousness during a period of transition and change. That is also included in my discussion. Khaja Muhammad Masoom. On May 7, 1599, in the small township of Sirhind near Delhi, Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi was rejoicing at the birth of his third son. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in a vision had communicated to him that the birth of this son would be very auspicious for Sirhindi's own spiritual growth, and that the baby boy, when he came to age, would spread Sirhindi's teachings far and wide. The child, named Muhammad Masoom, received the best possible early education according to the hagiographical literature. He memorized the text of the Quran while very young. He studied basic Islamic sciences with Sheikh Muhammad Lahori, who was a Khalifa of Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi, Akhund Sajawal Sirhindi, author of well-known Sharh Waqaya, and Badruddin Sultanpuri, another eminent scholar of that period. It was, however, later in life that he received ijazah for hadith from his own Khalifa, Sayyid Zainul Abidin Muhaddith Madani, during his Hajj in 1657 in the Hijaz. The principal teacher and nurturer of little Masoom in the mystical tradition was obviously his own father. He grew up in Sirhind, a township immersed in spiritual practices, which in the words of Sirhindi, I quote, has been given an exalted place over other cities and townships. This city has been entrusted with a light, which is like a light arising from the sacred soil of the house of Allah, that is Mecca, unquote. Ahmad Sirhindi spoke highly of his son's spiritual attainments, his profound understanding and knowledge of the traditional Islamic sciences, and his insight into the spiritual and other matters based on spiritual intuition, marifat. In one of his letters, Sirhindi described Masoom an embodiment of, that is Sirhindi's knowledge of spiritual matters, an exemplar nuskha of various stages of suluk, and the absorption in love, that is jazba, and not prone to making mistake and error. These are Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi's words about his son. When Masoom was 14-year-old, Sirhindi prophesied that upon coming of age, he would be a qutb, and then he designated Masoom 2 years later, 2 years before his death, as a qayyum. Khaja Masoom looked after his father's khanqa while he was absent from Sirhind from May 1619 to February 1624. Again, that's a different aspect of Sirhindi, his imprisonment by Jahangir, and which I have touched upon in another article which was published long ago in Studia Islamica. So on December 13, 1624, 3 days after Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi's death, Khaja Muhammad Masoom, his father's nominee, was installed as his successor. 50,000 people took the oath of allegiance to the Khaja, and 2,000 of them were major khalifas of his father. I mean, giving you all these data just to show that how the contemporary sources give you that information, and what is our role as a historian or scholars to really assess what is likely to be the situation, which is hard to say. But anyway, I have made a very humble effort here. So the ruling elite of Transoxiana, Khurasan and Badakhshan dispatched their representatives with presents to renew their allegiance, according to Masoom's biographer. The ceremony took place in Sirhind. Masoom wore the mantle of leadership for the next 44 years, covering the last 3 years of Emperor Jahangir's reign, the entire period of Shah Jahan's rule, and the first decade of Aurangzeb's rule. We have discussed the political influence of the religious elite on the Mughal state policies elsewhere, and that is where that is an article in Studia Islamica. Our focus here is to gain insights from some of Masoom's writings to help us understand his message of renewal and reform affecting the religious and moral norms of the contemporary society. Like Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindi, Masoom communicated with his disciples and deputies through letters. His major work, indeed the most important, is his 3-volume Maktubat, containing 652 letters, which span a period of 45 years of the leadership of Mujaddidiyya branch. And these letters are the most important source of information on his views on Sharia, on Tariqah, on Sunnah, on the society, and on the spiritualism. And then, more importantly, his responses to his disciples' personal, spiritual, and social issues. That's the area which interests me the most. Oh, family members. Acha. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope everything is okay. Then we have his other noteworthy work is Hasanatul Haraman, which falls in the category of Malfuzat. And this is an account of his visions and experiences during his visit to the holy places in the Hijaz for Hajj in 1657 to 58. And it was compiled by his son Muhammad Abaidullah. Now we come to Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan. Again, you see, I should tell you something about my methodology. Somehow I try to give some background information so that we could connect what they say to their life experiences. So I find it useful. I hope it's not confusing, the names and the dates for you. Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan, on March 3, 1699, 100 years after the birth of Khaja Masoom, another baby boy was born in Kalabagh near Malwa. At that time, Emperor Aurangzeb was struggling to keep his vast empire, which extended from the barren mountains of Afghanistan to the Bay of Bengal, from the snow-covered mountains of Kashmir to the lush green environs of Sri Lanka. The baby's father was in the imperial service, and according to a legend, Emperor Aurangzeb named the baby Jane Janan, soul of souls. The boy grew into Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan, a gifted poet in both Urdu and Persian languages, a writer, and above all, a spiritual leader and anchor of the Muslim community caught in a crisis of dissolution of the Mughal Empire. Mazhar was a Sayyid, descendant of Ali through Muhammad bin Hanafiya, a scion of Mughal nobility and related to the Mughal dynasty. While growing up in the imperial centers of Agra and Delhi, young Mazhar was instructed in the etiquette of rulership and in the performance of the martial arts, acquiring skills in various crafts, including mastery of weapons. Mazhar also received systematic education in the traditional and rational sciences, including hadith, from such teachers as Sayyid Nur Muhammad Badauni, who died in 1722, a descendant of Sheikh Abdul Haq Muhaddis Dehlavi, and known for his piety and strict adherence to the Prophet's Sunnah. And Haji Muhammad Afzal, a student of Sheikh Salim bin Abdullah bin Salim Basri, whose father Sheikh Abdullah bin Salim was Shah Waliullah's teacher. Mazhar learned the intricacy of Sufism from Hafiz Saadullah, a Khalifa of Muhammad Siddiq, who in turn was the son and Khalifa of Khwaja Muhammad Masoom. Mazhar studied Hadith and Fiqh with Muhammad Abid Sunami, and so these details show that all four of Mazhar's teachers, Sheikhs, were Naqshbandiya, Mujaddadiya, Sufis. And that is his source of spiritual authority, which I touch upon in a minute. So Mazhar's personality and intellectual strengths were shaped by altogether different circumstances. He grew up with the old when the old socio-political order was crumbling and religious reality was beginning to take on a different meaning. Mazhar's familial background, as we know it, was also very different from that of Masoom. He was in no position to claim for himself the designations of a Qutb or a Qayyum. His prominent Khalifas and biographers, Naimullah Bahraiji and Shah Ghulam Ali, instead of stressing that Mazhar traversed the high spiritual stations and experienced unusual visions, as the biographers of Khwaja Masoom do, they emphasized, praised him for his valor, generosity, high-mindedness, regality, justice, personal piety, and religiosity. Unlike Masoom, Mazhar was not in line to succeed any of his masters. There was no khanqa for him in Delhi to use as a forum to attract and guide people or use it as a haven in those turbulent times. Unlike Masoom, he could not claim spiritual authority on the basis of his lineage. The only link he had with Sirhindi's family was his spiritual connection through his four masters, who were the disciples of Sirhindi's grandsons. Despite such limitations, Mazhar's biographers, Bahraiji and Ghulam Ali, extolled him for projecting a personality with a rare blend of regality and mysticism. They also presented him as a charismatic leader who developed a large following from within the ruling elite, from the Rohilla Afghans and from the masses. His sense of modesty was not confined to downplaying his own achievements in Sufism. Though Mazhar was recognized by his peers as a masterly poet of Urdu and Persian mystical poetry, and I tell you, it's so beautiful. His Persian poetry and Urdu poetry is so latif, so delicate. He did not consider himself to be a poet of high enough stature to consider poetry as his profession. Poetry to him was simply a vehicle for expressing his experiences of mystical love. That is what Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan wrote himself. Unlike his contemporaries such as Shah Waliullah and unlike his own disciple and Khalifa Qazi Sanaullah Panipati, Mazhar did not seriously write on theological and juridical matters. However, Mazhar's letters to his disciples and their letters in response to him, and we are very fortunate to have his disciples' letters as well. Whereas in Khaja Masoom's case, we do not have those letters which the disciples wrote to Khaja Muhammad Masoom. So those letters constitute the most important source of his view on mystical, social and political issues. There are 5 published collections of these letters, which number about 499. His Wasiyatnama is short but insightful and understandably touches upon Mazhar's personal matters and concerns. Now we come to the next topic, that is the masters as role models and their followers. That is the next point. How were they perceived and how much they were serving as role models. Khaja Muhammad Masoom followed the example of his father in his daily routines, which in turn was based on the beautiful model of Uswa Hasana of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Masoom had no qualms in claiming that by the virtue of being Shaykh Ahmad's son, he was endowed with a share of genuineness, that is asalat, the love of the essence, that's muhabbat-e-zati, and learned the secrets of the ambiguities, mutashabihat, of the Quran from his father. He was recognized as a qayyum and qut, and therefore spoke authoritatively on the complexities of Sharia and intricacies of tariqah. Mazhar's contemporaries extolled Mazhar as the most eminent Sufi of the time. In the words of Shah Waliullah, I quote, "At this time there is no one else like Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan in any province or city of the world. Whosoever wishes to traverse the stages of mystical path should go to him," unquote. Shah Waliullah, along with another eminent alim and muhaddith, Muhammad Fakir al-Habadi, who died in 1750, praised him profusely for following the Prophet's sunnah to its minutest detail in his daily life. His biographers concurred that their master strictly adhered to the Prophet's sunnah and that his overriding miracle was his istiqamat, constancy in following the Prophet's sunnah and in guiding the seekers of spiritual enlightenment through various stages to gain closeness to God. While looking at Khaja Masoom and Mirza Mazhar Jane Janan as religious reformers and role models, we find that both echoed the views of the writers of the manuals concerning the centrality of the Shaykh in the Mujaddidi order. They unequivocally projected the Shaykh as a leader who should bring vitality and stability to the social and moral fabric through the networking of his trained disciples. Recognizing their own positions as Shaykh, both were conscious of their obligation to their disciple. As Sirhindi's successor, Masoom took responsibility of guiding disciples as a part of his mandate. He was groomed for his role from his early childhood. Mazhar, on the other hand, assumed a similar role because of his own strong conviction of a mission. So you can see the difference in their approach to it. And the mission, I quote Jane Janan, and he says that I had a vision in which someone called out from the world of unseen, ghaib, that you are expected to perform many assignments. Your person is integral to the guidance of the masses and the propagation of the tariqah, unquote. And he followed the edicts of his teacher, Nur Muhammad Badayuni and Sheikh Abid Sunami. And I think, well, I quote, today, as the year of 1185 after Hijrah, 1771 AD, in compliance with the edicts of these saints, Badayuni and Sunami, I have been training the seekers of God for the last 30 years. May Allah, with the blessings of His beloved Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, and my activities well. Now, who were the disciples? That's another question. So the Naqshbandi sources speak of a large individual seeking spiritual guidance from Khaja Masoom and Mirza Mazhar. But who were these individuals, and how widespread was the influence of these two masters through these individuals? This is a question which comes in the mind of a 21st century reader. In their maktubat, both Masoom and Mazhar spoke of massive numbers of people converging on them for guidance. Masoom, for example, noted that although his health was failing, a large number of seekers were flocking from all over like ants, moor, and locusts malak. And he is offering them guidance according to his energy. The murids are, however, greatly benefiting, and the flame and fire of their earnest fervor is burning and gaining in intensity. That's how Khaja Muhammad Masoom describes his disciples. The precise numbers of disciples and deputies provided by the biographers of both masters are hard to verify. The author of Rozatul Qayyumiyya, an unreliable source, for example, came up with a figure of 900,000 disciples and 7,000 deputies of Khaja Masoom, not including his sons and major Khalifas. From other more believable sources, such as Maktubat and Malfuzat, and visitors' account, we learn that a large number of devotees came from various parts of India, Transoxiana, Afghanistan, Turkestan, Hijaz, Syria, and Yemen. So then I have to skip certain parts. In our quest for information on Masoom's interaction with his devotees and its likely impact on them, we find that he had daily routines which included one where his companions and other disciples would sit at his feet in his circle, halaqah, and contemplate every day after the morning prayers. In the afternoon prayers, Masoom would have a halqa with his disciples for listening to recitation of the Quran. Quite often after the Zuhr prayers, he would also give lessons based on the explication of current texts such as Tafsir Bedawi, Talwi, Mishkat, and Hidayah. In the month of Ramadan, he would recite entire texts of the Quran while reading the nightly prayers. Large crowds of people would come from environs of Sirhind as well as from far-flung townships. So here, then there are eyewitnesses' accounts of, I should quote one, just to give you how, I'm in the quest of knowing what were the factors which made them charismatic or attractive to the people. For that I have to read their malfuzat and read what others were writing just to have some idea. So Mazhar's disciple and Major Khalifa Ghulam Ali has thus recounted the details of his master's congregations. I quote, "His assemblies were encompassed by divine light and filled with the Prophet's blessings. The silence and contemplation, that's sukut and muraqabah, would erase the thoughts of everything but God. The topic of his conversation would revolve around the Shariat, Tariqat, experiences of internal connection, that's nisbat-e batini. Examples from Hadith and Tafsir would further clarify. In prose and poetry would make his discourses very effective. He would explain various religious issues to the satisfaction of the audience. He would clearly articulate the great Sufi master's experiences of reality, haqiqah, and ma'rifah. Because of these accomplishments, he became the leader of people. The seekers of God converged on him from all directions. The ulama and the piety congregated in his khanqa to acquire divine blessings," unquote. So this is an eyewitness account of a learned Sufi alim, a poet, familiar with the art of oratory and blessed with a charismatic personality. The same author, while recounting the karamat or sources of Mazhar's inspiration for the disciples, again mentioned his istiqamat in following the sunnah of the Prophet. Now, then I have the program for the disciples. So here we see differences. Khaja Muhammad Masoom, belonging to the period when there was stability and there was the order in society, he laid a great stress on the quality of disciples, that one should make sure that they have the ability to really grasp the material, and they should have a very solid background in Islamic sciences before they start. And then it's the duty of the sheikh to help them progress step by step. But so proper instruction of the disciple was so important for Masoom that he restricted the number of disciples his deputies could initiate. So then I have cited some examples there. But 100 years later, during the period of Mirza Mazhar Janan, fundamental changes in the socio-political order took their toll on the physical and spiritual well-being of the seekers of the truth. The expectations changed, and so did the quality of the initiates. Contrary to Khwaja Masum's basic requirements for a novice, Mazhar expected his murids to abide by a simple and clearly defined, abridged declaration of faith, Iman Mujmal, to which Mazhar himself was committed. That declaration, in Mazhar's words, was, I quote, "I do believe in Allah and His Prophet, peace be upon him, and in the message brought by God's apostles. I love Allah's and His Prophet's friends, and I hate their enemies," unquote. So that was enough. That statement was enough for the disciples. Against the backdrop of the Shi'i-Sunni conflict during this period, this statement was least controversial and enough for salvation. Mazhar also added that the resolution of controversial issues by argument was the task of learned ulama, not of an average Muslim. In his brief Wasiyatnama, Mazhar, however, laid down the following basic principles for his murids to follow. I quote, and that is, striving to practice the Sunnah of the Prophet until their last breath, gaining closeness to Allah as the objective of their lives, adopting the ways of the Sufis, abstaining from social interaction with worldly people, and seeking knowledge of Islamic religious sciences. So this is very simple, straightforward formula which he was propagating for his disciples. Mazhar did not expect all of his disciples to be adequately knowledgeable about the basics of Sharia, and then of course he could not follow the advice of his predecessors, which I have, and then the way he was initiating his disciples is also very different, and I have to skip that. But I come to I think this will be of more interest to you, that is religious renewal and reform. In their teachings, both Masum and Mazhar emphasize the need of moderation, flexibility, and tolerance. In their view, acquiring knowledge of Sharia, implementing its injunctions, and practicing the Sunnah of the Prophet were prerequisites for traveling on mystical paths. This message was not conveyed through sermons and moralizing, but by their personal example. They provided a living example of the Sunnah and were conversant with the correct practice of Islam. So they were serving as a role model. And it's interesting that in their maktubat they never moralize. So it's the malfuzat which show that they were practicing uswa hasana in their lives. Their views on the family of the Prophet, Ahlul Bayt, and Shi'ism are worth noting, because recent scholars like Algar and Buller have associated Ahmad Sirhindi's successors with polemical hostility to Twelver Shi'ism. Love for the Prophet, his companions, and for his family is a recurring theme in the Maktubat and Malfuzat literature under review. Khwaja Masum's visit to the holy places in 1657 resulted in a series of visions, including the Ahlul Bayt, and reflected an intense outpouring of his love for them. Shi'ism as a faith and Shi'is as a group were not important topics for Masum. He refrained from identifying individuals by their sectarian affiliations. Among the 9 letters which Masum wrote to women, 2 were addressed to Jahan Begum, granddaughter of Bairam Khan, a Shi, disciple of Naqshbandi Sheikh. Again, it's very interesting to see that Bairam Khan was a Shia, and he was a disciple of Naqshbandi Sheikh Maulana Kamangar, who fled to Kandahar to escape the Safavid persecution. And he also was, of course, Bairam Khan, we know that he was a guardian of Akbar while he was a minor, and faithful noble of Akbar's father Humayun. Janan Begum, Bairam Khan's granddaughter, was married to Akbar's son Danial. We have no way of knowing if she maintained her grandfather's sectarian identity. If she did, it was not a factor important enough for Masum to note. There are 2 other letters in which Masum made a distinction between the Shi'is and the Rawafid. In responding to a question by a certain Mullah Abdul Razzaq on the practice of condemning the Umayyad Caliph Muawiyah, who died in 680, in the light of the Hadith literature, he categorically said that cursing individuals was not condoned by Islam. He cited the example of Ali, who despite his disagreements with Muawiyah, never imprecated him. Masoom passionately described Ali's personal qualities in these words, I quote, Hazrat Amir, and he's referring to Ali, was an embodiment of compassion. It was not possible for him to curse even an ordinary Muslim. Then, how could he curse Muawiyah, who was one of the Prophet's companions? Ali remarked about him, Muawiyah, and his group thus. These are Ali's words quoted by Masoom. They are our brothers. They revolted against us, but they are not kafir. They are not infidels or fasiq, impudent. Hazrat Amir had achieved the full and complete annihilation of self, had attained spiritual tranquility, and had liberated himself of egotism and individualism. However, these individuals who have evil bidding, nafs ammara, jealousy, spite, and enmity have accused Ali of cursing. Hazrat Amir had lost his self to the love of Allah and His Prophet. He was always ready to sacrifice his life and possessions for the Prophet and never condemned and cursed those who tortured the Prophet. Then why would he curse his enemies? This is Khaja Masoom writing about this issue. Masoom concluded the discussion with his ruling that the individuals who cursed Muawiyah but revered other companions were not Sunnis, and the Shi'is who did not approve those who condemned the first three caliphs, and the Shi'is did not approve those who condemned the first three caliphs. Therefore, such individuals, in Masoom's view, were neither Sunnis nor Shi'is. They had invented a third religion. In his letter to Prince Aurangzeb during his expedition to Kandahar against the Safavids to recapture the trading post, Masoom discussed the issue of jihad and touched upon the subject of a rebel group of the Shi'is, Rawafid, as this is a derogatory term, who had turned away from Islam. He quoted a hadith in which the Prophet was reported to have told Ali that in time there will be a group called the Rawafid who would attribute to Ali the things he did not do and the characteristics he did not have. They will curse Abu Bakr and Umar. They will make false claims to being the descendants of the Prophet's family, Ahlul Bayt. This is Khaja Masoom. During Mazhar's time, polemical discussions between the Shi'is and Sunnis intensified. Mazhar played down the differences between the two sects by preaching that dispute arose from not understanding the position of the companions of the Prophet, Sahaba, and Ahlul Bayt. Since the issue of succession to the Prophet in leading a community, Khilafat and Sahaba vis-a-vis the Ahlul Bayt was not part of the beliefs or pillars of Islam, Mazhar felt that it should not be given undue importance. He resolved this issue by believing in and acting upon the following statement intuitively revealed to him, and I quote, I believe in God as He is, and the Prophet as he is held by God, and the Prophet's family members and his companions as they were held by the Prophet, unquote. This belief transcended all differences, believed Mazhar. So here we see a Sufi who is living through this very intense period when Shiism was declared as a state religion in one of the provinces, but he does not believe in dissension or to have chaos in the society. So Mazhar's held equally liberal and tolerant attitude toward the Hindus manifested in 11 extant letters his high and low-ranking Hindu friends and devotees. So those letters which his Hindu devotees wrote to him, they have survived. So there it's really fascinating to read those letters where the Hindu, of course they could not be initiated because the prerequisite is that they should have a solid knowledge of Sharia. But they were his followers and he was praying for them. So here the kind of how they express their keen desire to meet him, and the mode of address reflect their reverence and devotion, such as supporters of the distressed ones and fortune of the destitutes, dastagir darmandagan wa sarmaya bi kasan, and then the Khudaye Gane Faiz Rasan. So these are the Hindus, they use these modes of address. Mazhar categorically stated that if the Quran and Hadith did not contain any clear decree on the status of Hindus, he would not consider them infidels. He interpreted the Quranic verse, I quote, and there never was a people without a warner having lived among them in the past. That's Surah 35, verse 24. To mean, this is his Mazhar's interpretation, to mean that the Hindus must have had warners and bearers of glad tidings among them. He therefore was quite amenable to recognizing Krishna and Ramchandra as walis and prophets. Mazhar is described as a religious purist by modern scholars such as Rizvi, whereas my own view is that his edicts were designed to reform the beliefs and behavior of his disciples. Mazhar, for example, urged his followers to earn their livelihood in an honest manner and asked them to eat only what was acquired by lawfully earned means. He played down the significance of karamat for circumventing his murids from superstition. He encouraged them to go to a living shaykh for blessing and guidance instead of going to the grave of a deceased Sufi. He disapproved of the rituals surrounding the commemoration of a Sufi's death anniversary. In his Wasiyatnama, Mazhar wished his disciples to bury him in accordance with the Sunnah and not to allow his grave to be turned into a shop. That is, that there should be no congregations and functions organized to commemorate his death anniversary. That is part of his Wasiyatnama. Now I conclude. So I did not present everything to you. I'm sorry for that because of the time constraints. But this shows that the authors of the manuals and their sheikhs were sensitive to corruption in religious beliefs and practices of their fellow Muslims and attempted to rectify them through their writings, their personal example, and their teachings relevant to the needs of their times. They all agreed that it was crucial for individuals to have good understanding of their faith and practice it in their daily life. Amongst the writers of manuals, Sanaullah, the Qadi, explicitly expressed his views on the above matters. He emphasized moderation in beliefs and worship, in other obligatory acts such as fasting, in the rules of the mystical path. Muslims should not go to the extreme in self-denial or opt for celibacy to attain spiritual ascendancy, suggested Sanaullah. He cited the example of Prophet as a perfect model of moderation and believed in the fundamental importance of the Sunnah, the Fiqh and Hadith for Muslims in general and the NAQSHBANDIA Sufis in particular. Adherence to the dictates of these sources of Islamic law ensured an individual's respect for obligatory rituals and refraining from the forbidden. In discussing his concern for social ethics and personal responsibilities, Sanaullah dwelled on such matters as physical purity, virtues of praying 5 times a day in the mosque, and merits of paying zakat, finding the most righteous person to lead prayers in the mosque, and observing the sanctity of fasting by refraining from backbiting and idle talk. Fulfilling one's responsibilities toward fellow human beings, Haqooqul Ibad, was considered absolutely essential to achieve harmony in society. If one fell short in this respect, even intermediation of the Prophet will not help on the Day of Judgment, according to Sanaullah. Marriage was indeed the Prophet's Sunnah, but a poor person without resources for taking care of the spouse should not marry, counseled Sanaullah. He also condemned the rituals practiced in the Indian Islam, such as holding ceremonies around the grave of the deceased sheikh, building elevated graves of awliya, and constructing domes over them, illuminating them, and celebrating the death anniversary of the awliya buried therein were schism, bid'ah, and forbidden haram. The Prophet condemned those who illuminated graves or prostrated in front of them, advised Sanaullah. Turning to Khaja Masoom and Mirza Mazhar, we find both sheikhs adhering to the NAQSHBANDIA practice of seeking solitudes in multitude, khalwat dar anjuman. A distinctive feature of the tariqah, a practice enabling the sheikh to remain connected with his physical and external environment while engaged in spiritual reflection. Both Masoom and Mazhar in their discourses showed their keen sensitivity to the world beyond the confines of their khanqah. And that's why this NAQSHBANDIA Silsala is considered to be very worldly. They were very freely interacting with their external environment. Masoom, for example, received a large number of seekers of the truth who converged on the serene and peaceful environs of Sirhind, a township, a garden in paradise, a window of Iran and Transoxiana, I'm quoting Masoom, and an envy of these regions. It was no longer a garden in paradise and was desecrated by hostile forces of Sikhs and the Marathas. His letters reveal his anguish over the destruction of Sirhind and anxiety over the political turbulence in and around Delhi. Both masters intermingled with the ruling elite. In the case of Masoom, they were the Mughal nobles, princesses, and rulers. He repeatedly expressed his delight over the widespread application of Islamic injunctions under Aurangzeb's rule. Living during the period of transition and confusion, Azhar was more concerned about the deterioration of law and order and expected his disciples, the Mughal and Rohilla nobles, including Najibullah, Afzadullah, Mullah Rahim Dad, and Imadul Mulk, to help restore social order. Whereas Masoom responded to the questions of high-ranking nobles and admonished them in general terms to be sensitive to the needs and welfare of the people under their control, Azhar asked his well-placed murids to find jobs for his numerous unemployed disciples. While Masoom advised the Mughal nobility to be otherworldly, Azhar wished the Muslim ruling elite to remain this-worldly, involved in this-worldly affairs. For example, he encouraged his eminent Khalifa Sanaullah to hold on to his position as Qadi of Panipat, despite the political and social turmoil created in that region by various groups, including the Sikhs and Marathas, and advised him not to resign because, quote, many people depended on him for their physical and spiritual well-being. In my view, Naqshbandi influence on Mughal rulers has been exaggerated in modern scholarly discussions. And I have in my notes, I have discussed all what modern historians have written. Political developments in the 19th and 20th centuries have colored modern historians' perceptions of medieval realities. Abul Hasan Zaid Faruqi, Johanan Friedman, K.A. Nizami, Sayyid Abul Hasan Nadwi, Hafiz Malik, S.A.A. Rizvi are among the many representing divergent viewpoints. The Naqshbandi order was no doubt active in the socio-political spheres of Muslims' existence. Indeed, the high-ranking nobles and members of the Mughal royalty were the disciples of Khaja Masoom. There is also some evidence that Khaja Masoom's group took side in the war of succession to support Aurangzeb against his brother Dara Shikoh. We also note that Masoom's son Khaja Saifuddin served as a witness in the Prince Azam's wedding on December 21st, 1668, and was a Sufi in residence at Aurangzeb's court. Khaja Masoom wrote 6 letters to Aurangzeb. I have given all that data to show that we still don't know if they made a difference, in the sense they affected the Mughal policies. They were there, they wrote, they instructed, but we have no way to judge their impact. But today's historians, the modern historians, they have written in detail that they were the policy makers and they were the forerunners of the Pakistan movement, and they were the ones who affected the subsequent developments, and that's where I'm not very convinced. And we have to look at the data just to see if